Hello, and welcome once again to Cognitively CRE for our September show. Hey, we've got another exciting show. And you know what? I'm so excited, and we have so much that we want to say that's incredibly valuable. I'm just going to jump right in and start introducing our guests. James Wadell, this is me. I host the show. I'm Executive Vice President for Cognitive Services. And with that, I would like to introduce Chris Bodler. Chris, welcome, sir.
Hi,
Chris
James.
is Director of our Business Intelligence and Analytics. He drives much of our services and work results in that group. Thanks for joining us, Chris. Hey, in an effort to help our audience understand sort of where you're coming from, just a quick, brief understanding of you, your background, and kind of what you do.
Sure. Hi, James. It's great to be here today. My name is Chris Balder. I've been in people analytics, change management, and workplace strategy for the last 10 years and worked across a wide spectrum of different organizations and different clients. And mainly my focus has been helping organizations and leaders better understand their data and find simple ways to make their data accessible and transparent for both their employees and their managers.
It's awesome. Thank you, Chris. And next, I would like to introduce our very special guest, Matt Childs. Matt, how are you?
Name's Chris. Thanks for having me on the show. Very excited to be here. Matt Childs with SoftBank Robotics. I head our North American sales. My career has been in obviously sales with the title, but transforming businesses through technology. So I spent the last 20 years in a mix of hardware, software, supply chain, marketing, technology, and really sitting on the cutting edge of what's next. And so I'm really excited about today's conversation because we are talking about something that's evolving in real time, that's very exciting, that means something to everyone, no matter where you're at, whether you're at home or in the office. The world is changing and automation is part of that story. So thank you for having me.
That's awesome. Thank you for being here, truly. Let me hop right in here. Let's get our first slide up. Give me 1 second to do that. Yeah, there we go. So robotic process automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning, topics that I think are top of mind these days. There are also trends that I think have been around for a while. But my general question for you guys, why are they top of mind now? Why now with these topics? Matt, I'd maybe like open that up for you. What's
why now? There's
why
a lot
now?
of reasons why now, James. I mean, I think when I see words like this on the screen, I get the feeling I get is like, oh, that's scary. Oh, that's behind the scenes, right? And so I think, these things are not necessarily new, right? It's been around, but they've never really been in the forefront like they have today, right? This is always, they've always been running behind the scenes. And when you think of AI, you think of what does that mean? And that's some big, sophisticated word and it's technology. But what really is it? And I think we're living in a world today where these things they're coming to the forefront. They're becoming mainstream. We're trying to, I think all of us we're all in the same storm, but different boats, right? But ultimately where we're going is we're changing the world, right? How we work, how we live. And this technology is now more relevant than ever, right? It's bringing out data, which I know we're going to talk about. It's surfacing the right information. It's streamlining businesses to cut costs. And really, I look at it as like we're in a COVID world, but automation, technology, business process management, AI are now hitting mainstream that'll help us move to a new world as we come out of COVID, where these things are now part of our everyday life. And they're no longer scary words we see on a slide, but they're just part of how we operate as an industry and as businesses.
Yeah, that's some good insight. And when I think about those words, to add to what you said, I think in terms of business continuity, and of course with COVID, we went through this exercise of business continuity, and I think generally everyone would say it was very successful. We managed to keep employees focused on task, doing the process work that they were used to doing. But I also think there's a business resiliency that can be looked at in terms of using artificial intelligence to ensure that some of the process-oriented work that we were doing is now not affected by an event like COVID. So I think that's some change in the marketplace. I know when we think about even some customer service areas, I've had lots of opportunity in the COVID world to have customer service conversations with folks, and typically there's a chat window or there's a voice menu, and some people don't know that that's technically a robotic process automation. That is a robot or an artificial intelligence on the other end that's guiding you through the conversation as you go forward. I do think it's a little bit scary, especially in the time that we're in, when we start talking about robots and doing things that people used to do, that it lends to the perception that maybe we're going to have less people working. And in fact, pre-COVID, this was a trend that we were talking about, and it was one of the very key topics, even at a governmental level globally, as to what in the future would happen if artificial intelligence, robotic process automation were to replace a majority of workers. And it was something that we were starting to talk about, thinking it was 40, 50 years from now. I don't think it's quite as dire as that. In fact, I think where we're at now, in fact, I think will create jobs. But I want to unpack that a little bit. Matt, let me go to you. Thoughts on what this means?
Let's unpack it. I think there's a couple sides to it, right? I think there's, it's easy to say, okay, automation is going to take jobs away. But I think ultimately, if you think about where automation started in factories, the robots picking, packages to be shipped, and now it's moving more to the front line. I think it's not so much about, taking away from jobs. I think it's taking on the mundane tasks that free up workers and labor to do other things, right? And so for our world, where I come from in SoftBank Robotics, we're focused on sanitization robots and cleaning robots. And a lot of the tasks that we're automating were generally, not very, what would consider a very visible or important tasks. And so the people that were, in charge of the labor around that, they can be doing a number of things at once. So it's essentially making their job more efficient and not necessarily taking away the job. The other side is the enablement, right? So we're talking about a COVID world. I'm at home, been here for 6 months. I'm sure you guys are as well. But some people are in the office, and then there's going to be people that are returning to the office very shortly as we start to ramp the world back up. And the other side is enablement, right? So automation will have the ability to enable employment, get people back into the job on site, meeting with each other, collaborating, and keeping things running. And that does that by, things like cleaning and safety and, other aspects where maybe we can't have, people filled in a room and we have to keep 6 feet apart. So we have less people on site. And that might be okay, but how do we make it safe for those people so we can actually get those people on site? And that's where you see the enablement of jobs. And I think without this, it's kind of a fine line, right? I think, you take to give, but you're actually optimizing, and the skill sets slightly change as it relates to certain tasks that you're automating, but you're also unlocking data. And I always go back to the data. I know we're going to talk about that in a bit. I get very excited because that is a big part of that, and that tells us what's going on, and that's at the root of all this. So.
Yeah. As you were talking, it really struck me that where we are now, obviously there's a lot of chaos, particularly in the built environment, and by chaos I mean a lot of unknowns. So where there's unknowns, there's chaos, and I think about the things that we were doing 5-10 years ago. Common sort of terminology in the business world is blue ocean strategy. So ultimately, for those not familiar with it, it's thinking of a new market for services or for products that your company has that isn't real yet, right? That can be real. So you want to help move in that direction into this new marketplace. And it struck me that COVID has been such a disruption in the marketplace that it's really sort of reset everyone. We're all trying to find out what this new market is. And what the next normal will be. I think that when I hear next normal, that's my thinking. That's what I envision, this sort of blue ocean strategy. And I think there's a tell there. There's a notion that we all need to be truly focused on innovation, thinking about how to take that next step in the innovation of our companies and innovation of our products, innovation of our services, how we interface with consumers and customers. All of that that used to be very strategic and nice to think about, and maybe it was something that was going to happen 30, 50 years from now, I think is is upon us, right? We have to have those conversations today. We have to find a way to be incredibly innovative.
And we're
And to
living.
that end, oh, go ahead, Matt. Sorry, yeah. Go.
I'm sorry to cut you off. I think we're living through it, right? I mean, I was thinking about it, with like Zoom meetings, or even the fact that we're live streaming right now. This technology has been around for 15 years, right? And what has this done, right? It's enabled us to automate our meetings and work from home. And so if you look at that and you apply that to other areas of your business, that's essentially what's happening, right? And for us, like a Zoom meeting or being, in a digital environment like this, it seems somewhat natural, but it really is the automation of us getting together in person to have the same conversation. And so if you apply that thinking across other areas of the business, especially in real estate and facilities, you can transform, right? You can transform the type of environment and how people feel in that environment, just like we are able to do that through a meeting like this. Yeah,
absolutely. Man, you create so many thoughts. When I hear your thoughts, my mind just goes.
I know we go in all kinds of directions, but yeah, no, I think.
No, I know. I mean, I didn't mean. I mean, it's very, very. It's good. It's thought provoking. It's inspiring. That's what I meant to say. Where my head went after hearing you is really about, are these real trends? I mean, is this a momentum that's really happening? Is it truly robotic process automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning? We've been talking about it. Are we still talking about it? Or is this something that is legit and real? We think it's legit and real at Cognitive because we've made some pretty big investments in research with CoreNet, Stanford Rebuild, going through a process at CRE Tech. And the industry is basically informing us that these are trends and giving us context to these trends. But let's take a look at some third-party data outside of the context of corporate real estate. Let's take a look at what's happening in IT. So this is from IDG, and they have an industry poll called their CIO Tech Poll, Tech Priorities. It certainly makes sense that cybersecurity has been and will continue to be the #1 most important tech project to date from a CIO perspective. That's a given, especially with everybody working from home. But let's unpack some of these next levels down. So BI, analytics tools, business process management, workflow automation, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. From an IT perspective, those trends mean something a little bit different than they do from a real estate perspective, but they're still the exact same trends. Artificial intelligence and machine learning, I can give you an example on the IT side. Aruba has an amazing platform out that has a cloud-based artificial intelligence that does predictive analytics on their solution sets. So that's real. We also have something similar in the smart building space. We have something related to predictive analytics that looks like artificial intelligence, which has some presets on the building systems, which helps save energy and reduce carbon footprint. From a workplace perspective, I think we're just starting to have that conversation. And in fact, I think there's maybe a gray area there. But before I get way deep in a conversation, I want to back up a little bit and ask Chris a question. Chris, thank you for being so patient with us. When I saw,
oh no, I think we lost him.
No.
So I think we can talk. Chris, you and I can talk a little bit about this, and we'll give James a second to get back on. But I think, oh, he's back. All right, James, you're back. We lost you.
Sorry, guys.
Set it up.
My end was just perfect. I don't know where you lost me, but I was going to ask Chris. Chris, one of the top trends, business process management, artificial intelligence, analytics and tools. What are you seeing in the customer engagements? Are these real from a world of workplace and corporate real estate, or are they only in IT? What are you seeing out there?
Sure. Well, first off, there is data everywhere, and executives know this. Like they're bombarded every day with different sources of data, and some of them are easy to get to, some of them are difficult to get to, and the real challenge is creating the tools and the dashboards important, or that will allow them to make the important decisions. And also, pushing these down to a more self-service level, because right now it's not enough for the executives to have access to the latest and greatest technology. We'll go over some examples in a minute, but without the managers also and senior managers being able to also make decisions based on this data, it really puts them at a crossroads where they know their competitors are doing it. They know that this is vital information that will make or break the company in the next 6 months, a year, 2 years. And the sooner they have it at their fingertips, honestly, it's the better. And it's an ongoing process. So definitely start where you're at with your organization. If you can only have an hour to a month to work on finding some different data sources and making them easier to access, then that's where you start. And if you have a more in-depth analytics team on your side, then you can get into more of the machine learning and artificial intelligence aspects. But don't look at these as what you have to be able to do today or what you should be able to do today. It's an ongoing process, and there's definitely a variety of stages that companies are in and when they're developing these analytic tools.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think of some of Churchill's quotes: "Start where you are, work with what you have." There's this term that we've coined, which is the WX Agile framework, Workplace Experience Agile framework. It's based on the Agile model for IT, but ultimately, in street terms, it's you MacGyver something together that you think is going to work really well. You pilot it, and then you fail fast, and you learn from that. And you take what's really working well, and you move that forward in your optimization plan. And I think it's another term that I like to say, logical fallacy. I think it's a logical fallacy to say that someone's going to sit in a room somewhere, or even in a meeting somewhere, even in a governmental room somewhere, and develop what we need to do to make workplace work again, and then tell the world, hey, this is the pattern, go do it. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think we have enough data to understand what the workplace wants to become. And I think what we need to do is take small steps, small pilot programs, test them, find out what's working, and then optimize on those and continue to move forward. It's the notion that our occupants now need to be treated as consumers because they can vote with their feet, right? Mm-hmm. If we don't have it right, then we have some pretty big problems. Before we get...
Sorry, I was going to add, from my perspective, just looking at these numbers here, I mean, it makes sense, right? Like as you're moving to a more automated environment, as you're unlocking more data, where should those investments be, right? It's on how do you collect that data? How do you make sense of that data? How do you package it in a meaningful way for the right audience? But then as you're adding more technology into areas of your business that you haven't before, you then are opening up exposure in certain areas, or the potential for exposure. And that's where I see, cybersecurity at the top makes complete sense to me, right? Like as you automate certain processes and bring that data online that was never online before, how do you control that data, right? And some of this data is very, very critical for your business, especially traffic in and out of a building, productivity as it relates to employees. Those are magic numbers that really contribute to the bottom line and determine, the stock price or evaluation of a company or the efficiency of the overall organization. So as I look at these investment areas and where folks are spending their time, it definitely aligns with the shift that we're seeing in the market towards unlocking these new areas.
Awesome. Yeah. Let me step back just for a second and say, for those of you joining us on our YouTube live stream, on the right-hand side, you do have the ability to interface with us, to send us questions or comments. Happy to have them. If it's pertinent to the conversation at the moment, I'll bring them in. If it's a general question, we usually wait to the end. But please feel free at any time to type in your questions or comments there. So let me bring this back into a corporate real estate perspective. And we have a mix. We have some IT folks and some facilities and workplace strategy folks on the call. So let me sort of give a baseline here. Historically, what we've done is we've talked about people, space, and technology in terms of starting a project, in terms of defining what our workplace needs to be. And usually we started the conversation with what's the corporate brand, the feeling around the brand that you want your occupants to experience when they're in the space. What are your corporate goals? What are your corporate initiatives? What are the things that drive your brand? And we try to build that into the workplace through color palettes and through digital signage and other things in that workplace. And then the next layer down, we started talking about the space and being able to optimize that space. So densification was a big topic that we had. And then densification had some issues with it, and we all know what those issues were, but ultimately we solved them with the notion that your assigned space that you went to was where you did focus work. And maybe it wasn't an assigned space, but you were given a space that you could do focused work in. And that meant if you had other types of activities, you had to get up and move to a different type of a workspace. So that could be formal enclosed collaboration, which are meeting rooms. informal collaboration, not to get too deep, but that's the notion of activity-based workplace. It's that you have the right mixture of space planning and furniture and technology deployed for the type of work that your occupants need to do. And they have the ability to kind of go to get up from their space and go find it. In the world post-COVID, I think things have substantially changed. And we've talked a little bit about the notion that trends have accelerated. And I wanted to give some context into some additional trends. But before I did that, let me pause for a second. I'm famous for not pausing and asking for input from the panel. Anything to add, guys, before I hop on to the next slide?
Chris, do you have anything? I've got a few things.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I think when I look at this slide, I think a little bit about the employee satisfaction as a measurement, right? And I'm getting folks, before I was creating layouts, there's companies that have their whole business model is how do we optimize the workspace for productivity and employee happiness and really optimizing that. And I think if you look over the last couple of years, a lot of those investments haven't been only in like the furniture and the layouts of buildings. They've been in technology, software specifically, tools like Slack and other related tools that are bringing employees together. So there's actually a digital version of what's happening physically, and I think that the trend and what we're seeing is a shift in saying, well, with those tools, you can kind of measure satisfaction. Are employees collaborating? Are they being effective? Now, how do you bring that element of satisfaction into the physical? And I think that's where automation comes into play. I think that's where, for my side of the business, again, and I'm not trying to plug, but just talking theory around this is how do you create a safe work environment so that people will come back in? They know that they can be productive in there, and the productivity based on the fact that they feel safe. Right. And so my business is robots for cleaning and sanitization, and the ability, again, to bring the data to ensure that it's safe ultimately creates, it kind of ties together digital, which you'd find on a tool like Slack or Teams, to the actual workplace itself and physical in a way where you can measure the satisfaction, you can understand the output, at least from a traffic standpoint, and then ultimately production as it relates to some of the other tools. So the world of offline is now becoming online and merging with the traditional online to kind of connect together and tell the complete story. And I think it all, at the root of it, goes that into productivity and the satisfaction of our employees, right? And wanting to be there and getting work done. So that's my take on this slide.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Chris?
I was just going to say worker well-being is continuously on our mind, and it's not something that's going to be going away. We've focused very heavily on productivity and performance and satisfaction up until this point. But going back in the office, first you need to be thinking about employee well-being. And without the proper data, without the proper knowledge about how your employees are feeling and perceiving this workspace, you're really not going to have a fighting chance. And employees will just stay at home. And that we all know that working from home is not the ideal situation for most of us most of the time. Some of us, some of the time, yes. And I've certainly put in my fair share of workplace strategy or workplace at work from home programs, and I think they're going to be working well in the future. But for now, when we're thinking about working in the workplace, you really have to think about well-being and how we're going to visually, physically, and just constantly remind people that it is safe to come in, and this is a great place for you to work, and please test it. Just give it a try.
Yeah, man, I absolutely. And there's so much, again, to unpack there on an amazing topic, just talking about well-being. I mean, we could spend hours and really good stuff, but I want to step back for a second. I want to introduce you guys to Nellie, who had a good question. So hello, Nellie. So here's the question. Do you think facility managers' roles are endangered by the innovation related to the COVID pandemic? Let me open that up to you guys, and then I have a thought, I think, on that. Let me start with Matt. Matt, what's your thinking?
Okay, I love that question because that's something I'm thinking about all the time, right? Is how do we help folks that are in facilities transform? I don't think they're endangered. I think the role is changing, right? It's not just about the basics of facilities anymore. And I think the benefit is it's getting associated with new metrics, right? You're getting tied into a larger story, which is in workplace enablement. So it's no longer facilities and the basics of that. It's actually tied into the productivity, and ultimately, I think at the end of the day, it goes into revenue, right? And so it's just how the organization looks at that, and I think it takes a mindset, a change or transformation on the facility side to say, hey, how do I up level this conversation? And I think it goes back to the data, my favorite word, data, right? It's like, how can you bring your side of the story to the table, right? What can facilities bring into the equation that ties into the larger story of the initiative of whatever, if it's a facility, is it a cleanliness initiative? Is it a safety initiative? Like, what is your role in that conversation and what do you bring to the table? I think if you don't think that way, then yes, I think it does put you in jeopardy. And it actually will start to separate. I think we'll see a separation between, our thought leaders that are pushing the bar as it relates to those types of metrics, and then the folks that are unfortunately probably left behind and still thinking of it as more of the basics. And so we're really at that point where that transformation is happening. But I think for those in facilities, I think this is a great thing. I think you have data coming online. I think there's no tools coming online. I think with that potentially opens up new budgets, different types of budgets where they're coming from, different initiatives, and facilities not just looked at as a facility. It's actually a key tool in driving business.
Yeah. Let me say, Michael, you've asked two very good questions that are related follow-up questions to this. I'm going to pause those for a moment. I think in a few slides, that'll be a very relevant question. Chris, any thoughts? Because I want to give our facility managers what could be considered a bit of tough love.
Sure. Well, first off, I personally know some facility managers that have taken a hit and they've have been let go from their organization. So there's definitely the possibility of individuals being affected by this. And I certainly feel for them. Like this is a tough spot for a lot of different industries and a lot of different professions, and we never saw this coming. So I definitely feel bad for the individuals that have been let go from the organizations. But at the same time, the individuals that are left, you've got a spot at the table that you've never had before. Like facilities it's unfortunately been on the radar, just like HR. Like we've been fighting for years to make our opinions known, and we finally have that spotlight on us. And it's now a matter of time of just continuing to understand what's the cutting edge, what other companies are doing, what works for us, what doesn't work for us, and just being that constant voice in the ear of the executives to help them make sure that they have the information they need, and to still see the facilities managers and the CRE folks in general as just a valuable aspect of their business.
Yeah, you said some of my key thoughts in a much nicer way. So thank you for doing that for me. So my thoughts just in general for facility managers, and really that's a large persona of worker types, right? So just generally speaking, there's been some trends that have been disruptive in the marketplace that's been happening in different geographics for quite some time. By way of example, if you're more on the building maintenance side, so the building systems side, there's IoT, cloud-based systems, sensors moving in for predictive analytics. So that's been coming. And I would say potentially with some resistance from a facility management perspective, because it's different from what's known and has worked. And I get it. The systems have been there for 20, 25 years. They always work. If you try to do something different to them and they break, now it's a huge capital expenditure. And it was a good conversation to have in that persona to say, it's working, let's just keep it working. There's generally two camps, and especially in the environment that we're in anywhere in the world, it seems like there's two camps on any topic. There's no middle. It's just, there's two extremes. There's two extremes in the corporate real estate world as well. There are those that are waiting for a vaccine and everything will just go back to the way it was. And there are those that have realized, and I'm certainly on this camp, that it's never going to go back to the way it was. And the only way that we're going to move forward is for us to wrap our head around what that next step in innovation needs to be. And don't be scared of that. Own the change management. So that's my encouraging statement to you guys, to Nelly, to you specifically. Be the change agent for your team or for facility management in general. Understand what's happening in the building spaces, the building system spaces, particularly in the workplace, which is something that you may have not gotten too deep into in the past. There's an entirely new trend coming up where what's traditional from a building, traditional from a facility sources perspective, so services perspective, cleaning and maintenance and bathroom toiletries and things of that nature. There's an area in the middle, which is where enterprise tech lives, and not the IT enterprise tech. It's the corporate real estate enterprise tech, and that's a whole new thing. That's the contact tracing. That's the artificial automation and systems that we're talking about. Your enterprise IT team doesn't know a lot about that. Your corporate real estate executives, that persona, that team, is now being asked to take the lead in solving those problems. What are those technologies? And they're looking for very good conversations and collaboration between IT and facilities in order to get there. Now, as not to sound salesy, but that's one of the reasons we exist as a consultative firm, is there's no one you can turn to get very good information other than a handful of world-class consultants, right? So be that person, be that world-class consultant for your team. And I think that will ensure that you're very successful moving forward. Sorry, I got on a soapbox. Moving off my soapbox for a minute. Let's talk about the two very key trends that are affecting corporate real estate at the moment in workplace, particularly. I want to unpack the word autonomous in this segment, but I also want to talk about activity-based work versus outcome-based work. We defined activity-based work a little bit. It's where you get up and you go find the right space to do the activity that you want. Outcome-based work is a way for us to ensure that we're driving the right amount of, or the right type of social interaction, the right type of community problem solving. And ultimately, it's a way to create a workplace with an experience that helps drive innovation. More about that in a second. So what is autonomous workplace and automation in the workplace? I think it's at least two things. It's the ability to take mundane, process-oriented tasks and replace them with some digital logic, some intelligent automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning, to free up a human to do other things. When I think about cleaning, what that allows me to do, and not to steal thunder from Matt here, but it was one of the things that excited me about what SoftBank Robotics America was doing. When you think about vacuum cleaning, it's a lot of time. If you can do that with an autonomous solution, the person that used to have to stand there and run the vacuum is now free to do additional sanitation activity, which is one of the stressors that we had for going back to work. So that is a very good logical use of robotic process automation or autonomous solutions in the space. There's also another notion, which it's where your enterprise systems and this new solution set, we call it autonomous workplace solution sets, that generates data either from sensors or from existing IT systems, and then reports that type of data back out to the occupants. It also shares data. So that's more of a step two. So that's like a 5 or 6 year or 10-year time frame. And the intent of an autonomous workplace is it takes the action or the necessity for the occupants to reconfigure the space from a technology perspective. I shouldn't have to go in the room and spend 35 minutes figuring out how to get the video conferencing system going so that I can bring in my remote teams. That needs to be something which is just absolutely seamless, like I have at home, right? When I'm at home and I want to broadcast my phone to my TV, it takes me like a second. I got a Samsung TV and a Samsung phone. I hit a button and it's just on there. It can be that easy in the enterprise, but we have to plan for it. So let me step back for a second and ask you guys your thoughts on what autonomous workplace means to you. Matt, let me go to you first.
Yeah, I think this is it's interesting, right? Because I think that there's a couple sides of this. There's like what you were mentioning, James, in terms of automating specific tasks or not having someone do that work. I think there's also, so it all comes down to a few different things, right? I think at the end product is creating an efficient workplace. It's creating a safe workplace. But I think the other side of that is proving it, right? So, and when you don't have, like, I'll use vacuuming because it's the easiest example, right? a lot of times, so people are concerned with the cleanliness of anything, right? I mean, I go to the store and then I've got hand sanitizer. Everyone is making sure that they're clean, but how do you know, right? Like, how do you know that it's clean? How do you certify that? How do you know that it's safe? And so, that's for my world, it's expanding areas. So, vacuuming, cleaning, sanitization, changing air filters. These are all part of the norm right now. In fact, it's probably double, tripled, quadrupled in terms of how those things are done. Are they automated always? Not really. What is the perception of clean? What is the perception of safety? How does that relate? Is it perceived better when there's an actual person, or if a robot comes by? And then if a robot comes by and the robot's vacuuming or scrubbing the floor, what is that perception to the worker? Is it safety? Is it how does that resonate with that worker? And then ultimately, I think it's there's a black box that exists there, right? In terms of the data, right? And certifying that. How do you know that something's safe, right? And you figure that out through autonomous technology, right? And the data that feeds. And so I think it's looking at that and saying, what can we unlock to create an experience in the workplace, but then also feed into how workers and management perceives that, which is the data side. And I think that's the massive opportunity here. It's actually flipping it a little bit and saying, why would we sanitize in the evenings or when no one can see that? And why don't we do that during the day? And why don't we deliver real-time information around the cleanliness and the safety of a facility and deliver that to our employees and deliver that to management, so they have that information in real time, along with everything else. They're getting metrics around everything else in their business as it relates to the operations. Why shouldn't that be part of that? So I think you have the automation of labor. I think you have a paradigm shift in terms of how that labor should be executed. And maybe it's not a human, maybe it's a autonomous technology doing that. And then the data element that plays into that. And all of that together is the experience, right? You're generating that experience. It's what they see, and then it's the information that they get. And so that's kind of what I see as it relates to the experience side of autonomous workplaces.
That's awesome. Chris, apologize. I'm going to move on to the next slide. Michael Gresty actually has a very good comment that I think is important for us to talk about. Michael, you're right. The office, my opinion, I completely agree with you. The office as we know it and the demand for office space will probably almost certainly be less as we move forward. The amount of space we needed to house workers from an activity-based workplace perspective was huge. And what we were just starting to see in the CFO offices globally right before the pandemic was, in general, the office utilization for activity-based work was somewhere between 40 and 55%. So just starting to ask the questions, why am I paying $250, $300, depending on where you are, per square foot for this type of an office environment, and then recurring cost on top of that, if I'm only using 40% of it or 50% of it at any given time? We've certainly proven that work from home has its advantages. So when we think about activity-based work, that's typically process-oriented work. You're doing your heads down, you're doing your focus work. We are able to have some meaningful collaboration online. We're doing that right now, in fact, right? That's our digital workplace. The piece that's missing, and it certainly shows up in the data from Leesman and even in our own data, is the social interaction needed to truly collaborate and to come up with innovative thinking. And that's what Netflix was trying to get to, right? That's the CEO was in the press quite a bit saying, hey, it doesn't work for us. And really what I heard in the context of what I know based on our research is that you as humans, for us to really get together and to collaboratively innovate or move something forward, that has to almost be done in real time. And for now, I will say it does have to be done in real time. Now, when we start talking about augmented reality and virtual reality and the ability to bring other things in, different conversation. Right now, the state of where we are from a solutions perspective, that's what outcome-based workplace ultimately is. It's not a place where you go to do your process work. It's a space that's specifically designed to give you an experience that's almost impossible, very difficult to recreate anywhere else. And that experience is all around being able to very effectively collaborate and communicate the way we do as humans. We have to see the gestures, the breath rate. There's a, I hate to get into mysticism, but there's an energy that we have. You can feel it in the room, right? When you walk in a room, you can feel the energy of a room, and we need that. It's just innate in the human spirit that we need that when we truly get together and have an understanding of what we're doing and how we do it. Speaking, collaboration, communication in general is just the illusion of understanding. All the rest of that is in our body language. So I agree with you, Michael Gresty, in short, that office space will change. There will probably almost certainly be much less of it than what we have today. What we move to will almost certainly be something entirely different. Unispace, I have no relationship with Unispace. Unispace is a leading architectural engineering firm. Been keeping an eye on all of them. All of them have great thoughts. I think Unispace is absolutely brilliant in their approach because mostly they align with us. So that's why I think they're brilliant. They are thinking in a very similar exact way that we are. In fact, the outcome-based work is language that is being used at Unispace in what these new spaces will become. So thank you for asking that question, Michael. Let me go back to you, Chris, and maybe anything to unpack in the stuff that we just said.
No, I feel that there's plenty of opportunity here for improving the experience and finding different ways that we can better provide the information, the environment that people really do want to have when they're going into office.
Yeah. I missed, and I'll put you on the spot, and I apologize for that. I missed my opportunity. What I should have said, Chris, was the only way outcome-based workplace is truly going to work for us is to make sure it's on a path of optimization. And the only way to get there is with data. So what does that data look like? That would have been a great question. So moving on to the next slide.
Transitions.
Yeah. So there's I think there's two key things that we really, really have to focus in on, right? And we know we want to start small, pilot something, make sure it works, but we have to do that in these two different dimensions. So the space utilization and the technology performance management. Any insights or things to unpack for you on this slide?
Sure. Well, before we get into this, analytics, it can be a very daunting word. Like, people think big data, statistics, they think that these backgrounds they don't have, and they can't do this kind of thing. And for the most part, it's not true. There's simple analysis that we can be doing. There's much better tools out there that can be doing it for us. And what does this lead? This leads to us having better ability to predict the future. And that's what all this is about, having better understanding and data behind space utilization and technology performance. Like, these now allow us to make better decisions going forward and be able to understand like how people are using it so that we can make decisions. Do we need to downsize? Do we need to increase our investment in technology spend? Do we need maybe just rearrange the office space a little bit to allow better access to the tools and technology we do have? In the comments earlier, I saw that there was just questions around how will AI and automation better help us understand migration patterns in the office. And this has already been going on. This has been going on for years. It's be able to take the data from multiple sources, the IoT, as the buzzwords are going around today. Like, IoT is allowing us to take data sources from 1,000 different sources and bring them together in one easy to understand package. And allowing us to do this, you are able to see the overlap between different technology sources and be able to see like, hey, like, how do these different sources interact, and how do they make the employee experience better or worse going forward? Like, we really don't know, and that these are things that we will be testing and we will be pilot testing as we continue on, because as we say, like, we may be automating a simple task that goes in the wrong way, and all of a sudden, like, that behavior of that person may change, and now all of a sudden, like, we've automated the wrong solution for them. A simple example, like, we determined that we have badge data sensors when we walk into a conference room, and through that badge data sensor, it now knows that Chris is walking in that room. He likes the room to be exactly 74 degrees, and it's great for the summertime. But what about when winter comes? Does Chris want it to be 74 degrees anymore, or do we now need it 80 degrees? Well, based on past data, Chris wants it 74 degrees, so it's gonna be freezing in there during the summertime. So this is maybe in the South where I'm from, but there's,
A bit of an extreme example, but I get your point.
we're always trying to making sure that the data we're putting out there and the analytics that we're doing still apply today just as much as they are going into the future.
Let me pull up Michael's comments. I apologize, Chris. I tried to get that not to cover you up, but so how effective will AI be in identifying occupancy and migration behaviors that inform safety and corporate policies as we return? And then the second part of that question is, will human nature be the wrench in the automation gear? And I thought that was a very smart and informed question. I think what I want to do, Michael, is go to this next slide and then provide some insights into what that is. So hang on here. So here's our next slide. Nope, here's our next slide. The number one barrier for return to office is occupant perception. So is there a way, in order to use the systems that I have in place, my building systems, my IT systems, my AV systems, my security systems, in order to generate data related to occupancy, migration patterns, contact tracing, dwell time for contact tracing, to inform the occupants as to how safe a space is, or potentially when a space might need extra sanitization? And the answer is absolutely yes for the first part of that question. Let me pause for a second and let you guys chime in. Thoughts on that question?
I've got a few thoughts. So, I reside in the San Francisco Bay Area, and if you follow the news, San Francisco, there's been kind of a mass exodus from the city as it relates to workers, and a lot of the businesses are telling people, to work at home, and some of them indefinitely, and so it's we're working with a lot of customers that are trying to re-envision this layout. I think it's funny because we went to this mode of cubicles to break down the walls. Everyone needs to see each other, and we have these common workspaces. And now it's not even bring the walls back. It's re-envision the whole thing. And so I think data plays into it. I think from what I'm hearing out in the field is there's kind of it's multifolded, right? For us, it's sales conversion data, right? Like we know with some of our customers that if they bring their prospects and their customers into an office environment to hold meetings and demo technology or whatever it may be, conversion rates go up, right? So that informs what we do with the office and who goes into an office and which teams are prioritized. It also changes really how the office is used, right? I'm working with some customers that are realizing that because of the data around conversion and insight meetings as it relates to sales and customer support for certain products, even re-envisioning a floor, right? What does it look like if we take this floor where we had 100 desks and turn it into a demo floor, right? And re-envision how that floor is used, still get the use out of it. The ROI is still there because the revenue as it relates to the actions that are happening in those environments are still right in line with the productivity that's expected. That will drive that as well. And so I think there is like an element of data. What data do you use? I think it can go everything from my world, which is revenue, to safety, to various other things. So I think it's an interesting thought. I was walking down Market Street in San Francisco looking at empty buildings the other day, thinking about, okay, this is a lot of real estate and a lot of very innovative companies in San Francisco. How are they going to get people to come back in? How are they going to create a perception that the office is safe? And then what are they going to do with these floors where there were once cubicles and open workspaces? And I think it really is that. It's optimization. It's looking at the right type of data to make the right types of decision. And it's the perception of what that brings. So that's what I think about when I look at a slide of this. It just like back to personal experience and how do we utilize space? And it's just looking at it a different way, I think, and using the data to look at it in the right way to make the right decisions for your facility plan.
Yeah, Chris, any follow-ons, additional insights? Oh, Chris, I think you might be on mute. You are. Your mic's muted. There we go.
Got it. Employees care just as much about this as the building managers do and the facilities management. They want to know that there's the clean seats and there's seats that have been identified as not clean so that they can make the decisions for themselves. And this is this is something I've seen actually becoming much more popular, is that companies are putting out heat maps of spaces that they know are highly utilized and other areas that are less utilized. Not necessarily to keep people from going or coming from those spots, but to just kind of understand the general trends and to help people understand that there are areas that are clean. We have been taking a lot of strong efforts to make sure that that perception is correct.
Yeah, thank you for that. Michael, to your second part, will human nature be a wrench in the automation gears? So don't tell anybody. This is a super secret. I'm going to give you our secret sauce for success at Cognitive. When you start the journey of autonomous workplace, the first thing you want to do is ensure that you have access to as much data as possible. And usually that means mining your IT, AV, security, facility systems, IWMS systems, you name it, get it. The next conversation to have is, are these insights meaningful insights? Almost certainly, all of those systems were deployed not for the purpose of generating data and insights. So now you've got to really put some thinking into what your workplace strategy is for you and what you want to measure going into the future to ensure that the tactics that you've put in place are effective so that you know what optimization looks like, right? That could be contact tracing, that could be utilization of particular solutions and technologies, that could be particular space plans. All of that needs to be reported on and democratized. All of the people related to that workplace need to have an understanding of what their input is into that space. So it's not just a matter of facilities having it or IT having it or corporate real estate or the CFO. Everyone needs to have access to that same set of data. So you got to be a little careful. It's got to be anonymized. But the point is, democratize it, make sure it's insightful. The next step in that journey, I know what all the systems are doing. I have data being generated from them. I know what the occupants are doing and what systems are being very effective for them. What if, so you can start running some scenarios, system Y passed data to system X, and it did something without any person having to do it. So the great example was, what if Chris walked into a room, it was December, it's 22 degrees outside because 22 degrees Fahrenheit because Chris is in Chicago, he's visiting. And Chris doesn't like the room cold. Well, maybe we had the temperature turned down. We had the VAV valve shut off. It knows Chris is in a meeting, so I can exchange all this data behind the scenes. And I know that it needs to start the warm-up process for Chris to be there. And that's going to be true for a large persona of people, right? It's not just Chris. We're going to lump things together in personas. And if this persona has the room for 45 minutes or more, then we're going to try to bring the temperature up X% by adjusting the VAV valves for that room. We can predict at that point what will be successful and not successful. And there was this thing called digital twins, and it got really complicated from a campus perspective to be able to recreate the building and the built environment in the workplace and the model and have lots of software associated with it. And I think that was a trend that was going to be very successful at some point in the future. I think where we are right now is in a much simpler model, being able to look at that and saying the data that I'm generating from my UC and C gear, Unified Communication and Collaboration gear. There's a really cool platform called Viopta. I can pull data out of that, and I don't have to put any sensors in. I don't have to, and it's just a software package, so it's fairly inexpensive, and get some really cool insights. The next layer of insights I might be able to generate is a platform called Relogix, one of our reference partners, as Viopta is as well. And that allows me to install sensors. Those sensors allow me to get more granular into what's happening with contact tracing and dwell time. And it also generates some additional insights. But now the capital expenditure is a bit more. And then the very last, most in-depth solution that I can have is a whole building system. Let's say Schneider Electric, right? They have some really amazing, complete building systems that have workplace sensors built into them. It's a single platform that gives me building insights along with workplace insights. But you've got to have the course and the destination set in order to know what optimization looks like. Otherwise, that data is just data, right? And it's not going to go anywhere. So that's my insights answered your question on that. One of the other really interesting questions is, okay, James, if this is all super cool and we all need to be doing it, why haven't we done it? It's a question that I love asking. And it just so happened there was a data point on the IDG report, and it gave us some insight into why some of these trends are happening, at least on the IT side. Lack of staff, skill set, too focused on status quo, disconnect between IT and the business. And I've been in this industry for, goodness, forever, right? Since the 90s. I don't want to admit how long, but for a long time. And there's always been a disconnect between facilities and IT. And there's generally always some disconnect between the business and the two. And it's just the way it is. And when I see this, what I internalize is there's this persona, corporate real estate executive, that's begging for help in better understanding how to implement technology because they have this absolute need. And on the other side, there's this IT team that's going, yeah, but that's not what we do. That's not the enterprise stuff that we do. Maybe there's somebody else that does that. And the same on the facility side. So going back to that question, I can't stress it enough, and I feel like I'm on a soapbox, so I'm just going to stay on it. We all have to wrap our head around what can we do to innovate. Someone's moved our cheese, ladies and gentlemen, and we've really got to get our head around that and find a way to do things much differently. So there's one thing that I leave you with. It would be reach out to your counterparts, to IT, to facilities, to corporate real estate, and just ask them if what we've said today is real and how you can help them move in the right direction. That would be the one thing I would leave you with today. But let me open it up, guys. Don't get on a soapbox like me unless you want to. But unpack that a little bit for me. What's your thoughts?
I'm happy to go first. So, yeah, I think it's aligning the stories, right? And so, lack of budget. I think we're in a unique time in history where there is budget in other areas, right? So, how do you tie facilities to tech, right? And some of this, it's basically what we've been talking about today. And how do you build a story around that? There are initiatives, right? People are trying to figure out, what do I do with my real estate? What do I do with my office? How do I get people back in the office? What do I do if they don't come back in the office? How do you become part of that conversation at a higher level, right? Instead of just being the holder of facilities, how do you become a stakeholder in a larger conversation around how technology, automation, and anything else that you envision plays into the larger story? Like, revenue-minded, employee engagement-minded, productivity-minded. I think it's a change of conversation, and it's almost inserting yourself into other conversations that you may be uncomfortable going into because they haven't been a part of before, but getting a seat at that table, right? Because it now is a part of the equation, and tech is now merging with facilities like it never has before in history. And so you do have a seat at that table, but you have to come and you have to make the case and explain how your piece fits in with the larger initiative. And that's kind of what I would leave you with coming out of this. For me, my takeaway for everyone that's joined us today is like, figure out how to change the conversation, right? How to pull in, how to align yourself with the initiatives of getting back into the offices, streamlining, driving revenue, all the key core business things that really matter at a time when things are being crunched. And that might be taking a step back and trying to understand all the initiatives at a high level and doing some research or having some conversations and then going and approaching someone, or it may be just coming to the table with ideas. But I encourage you, the more conversations we have around this and the more, internal relationships cross-functionally, I think the better you're set up for this transformation in the future.
Yeah, Chris, I apologize. I'm going to sort you a little bit. We are almost out of time. The thing I'd also like to leave you with, I have lots of thoughts I want to leave you with. I'm going to try to minimize them, but this one last one. When you think about autonomous workplace or what your next iteration of workplace needs to be, we certainly talked about it's going to be something less than, as far as footprint goes, than what we have. But it's also going to be more than what we have now. It's going to be different. It's going to do different things. Think of it as a platform. And I want to go back, and again, I'm not selling SoftBank Robotics vacuum sweepers here, robotic vacuum sweepers. What I'm selling is a better workplace, the thought of a better workplace, if selling is the right word, right? It's a platform, it's a system, it's a solution set to make your occupants feel better about the space that they're in. Why are they in that space? It's not to do heads down focus group. It's to get together, the innate need for humans to collaborate in a group manner. We've been doing it for millions of years. We're not going to stop it tomorrow and be effective at it. We have to recreate that space. And it has to be somewhat of a holistic approach. So think in those terms, the holistic approach. I'm going to leave you with one more slide. This is probably the most important slide. You were asked to attend. It was very easy to attend. There was no registration. But it also makes this very difficult for us to say, hey, if you have any more questions, get in touch with us. So here's what I would ask of you. I would ask that you go to our landing page. We've created a landing page. It's somewhat of a hidden landing page, so it's somewhat of a secret. It's only for you guys. And the way to get there, well, first, all you do is put in your name and your email address, and we'll get back to you in 48 hours. If you have a specific concern or a question or a topic, you can put that in the main body here, and that'll give us some context in order to do some research before we get back to you. And again, we promise to do that in 48 hours. So here's what we do. If you have your phone, just put it on camera, take that QR code, will take you right to the website. If you have an eidetic memory, you can memorize this bit.ly thing. But if you give me a moment. No, I was going to put it into the comment sections, but I'll do that in the recording. So look for that in the recording in the comment section on the website. With that, I see that we are out of time. We are just over an hour. Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you so much, Chris, for taking the time to be on this conversational topic of autonomous workplace. That felt great. We had lots of comments and questions from our audience. Thanks, guys, for everyone and girls for your comments. What we will do moving forward is we'll get deeper into the solution sets from an educational perspective and from an impact perspective on what outcome-based work is and what solution sets look like within that outcome-based workplace and why you need to be thinking about those solutions. Any final thoughts from you guys?
I would say thank you. I think this is a great discussion. I think it's evolving, right? I think we could come back in 6 months from now and see what's changed and what trends are catching on, and maybe we should. And again, I would encourage everyone just to take a different look at this with a different lens and based on some of the things we discussed today.
Yeah, these are very exciting times. I look forward to everything that everybody's able to accomplish in the next couple of months, and all the new ways that we can learn from each other.
Yeah. Lots of kudos, guys. So clearly resonated. Thanks, everyone. Truly. We'll be putting out some cognitive briefs shortly. So tell your friends. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care.